Yo, Stacy! Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, baby!
Hello there, everyone, and what's this? Extra talking smack? You bet your ass it is. Should we start off with a swear, Alex? I don't know. Maybe that's not the right content for this sort of discussion.
No, we shouldn't. But you know what we found out? Goofy can fuck.
Wasn't that from an extremely goofy movie?
Hey, at least once, and you gotta get out of it.
Well, I think to join in on this debate where we are going to talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and much, much more, and definitely more on the much, much more here at Talking Smack, we are going to be joined by the Back to the Balcony boys, not just Justin, not just Antonio, but Antonio and Justin. Fellas, how you doing?
Great. Is this a first where we're both on an episode for you at the same time?
Yeah, this is definitely the first time for both of you on Talking Smack, at least.
Yeah, I think so.
Odd seeing four squares here, so this one should be interesting. And again, I say it with every Back to the Balcony episode is I can't wait for Antonio's input on this, and I guess Josh and Alex too.
Well, I mean, like, it is definitely a little bit of a gimme on this one because we have covered this on my podcast before, the film with Josh Scar. So it's already out there in the zeitgeist that he and I have very special places in our hearts for this movie, but I have no idea what Alex thinks about it or Justin. So that'll be a great thing to learn about some of my favorite podcasting collaborators of how they feel about Goofy movie and how we feel about all this behind the scenes coolness that we know from this documentary.
Yeah, that Goofy movie episode will be linked in the episode description just because that is one of my favorite things I have done on a podcast thing. Doing it with Antonio just makes it all the more amazing. I think that's the first time we ever collaborated. I went back and listened to it, and we released it almost 3 years ago exactly. I think it was in June is when the episode came out.
Yeah, that sounds right, man.
Yeah, June 2022. Like we were fresh faced in the podcasting business. Like we had just come back for Talking Smack. We'd only been around for like another 6 months ish at that point. By the time we recorded it, the Cultworthy was still fairly new. It was a strange time.
It was like about a year old, but I hadn't really started doing guests yet. Like it was still early on in the days of doing guests. So yeah, because we have to remember that the first 40 episodes I did were like solo review episodes, kind of like what Justin does with Movie Wire. It wasn't until I started getting like the brain trust as guests that I started doing those kind of episodes.
And yet, despite my repeated pleas, I haven't been guested on your show, Antonio. And I have repeatedly begged.
You have to fill out the form.
There's a form?
There's a form and a background check and a credit check and there's
test.
one other check. Drug test, that's right.
You already have my credit card and a copy of my social. I didn't realize I had to fill out the form, too.
Yeah, well, you can't be too careful these days, man.
All right.
See, you're avoiding the background check, Alex.
Hey, listen, there's just some things we don't discuss, okay? And listen, I'll give you back your shovel one day.
So we are gathered here today to talk about the most venerable of Disney movies and the new documentary that came out about it. Not Just a Goof, which is a celebration of maybe Disney's biggest cult classic, like more so than The Black Cauldron or any other such thing that Disney has put out. Like, how many cult classics would you say Disney has? Would like even The Rocketeer be a cult classic? I don't think it's
the way they treat it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true.
I would say Great Mouse Detective is probably a cult classic as well.
Yeah, that's a good pull.
That whole like mid 80s generation, the Katzenberg years, you know?
Yeah, and Katzenberg is a good place to start, I guess, because the whole reason we even were offered the opportunity to get a Goofy movie in any semblance was because Katzenberg was trying to subsidize some of that big Disney Animation Studios money with using the TV studio to also make theatrical releases, which is how we got a Goofy movie, which most people kind of know that the TV animation department created a Goofy movie. But one thing this documentary did is it put a little bit more into context, because in the episode that Antonio and I had previously reviewed and discussed more in depth a Goofy movie, I knew that there was like a contractual obligation to get the movie put out, but I didn't know like the machinations of where that contract obligation came from. And this added a lot of context. Like the first probably 20-30 minutes of the documentary are devoted to the pitch to Katzenberg about how to make a Goofy movie work, not just like the concept of what we now know as a Goofy movie, but just a movie featuring Goofy as the main character. So what did you guys kind of think of the opening salvo to this documentary?
Here's kind of where I'm torn is when we look at it, and it goes heavy in the nostalgic piece of it to really be a movie for fans, and as it should be, because this one, as we see from the last 30-40 minutes, it has the emotional element that the movie kind of tags into, that it really does play homage to the fans. But there is a moment in this movie that I do wish I had more. And that's when we have the big tote of lost footage saying, this stuff hasn't been seen in years. You are the only eyes to see this. And I just wish I could just binge 24 hours of what was in that tote. So to me, I think there was a missed opportunity on footage that it teases us with, that I know there was something of treasure in there. And when it comes to how this movie was presented, I think it leans very heavy in the emotional aspect to play tribute to this movie. And I'm not going to fault it for that, because I liked it. I did find it. I shed a tear at the end of this documentary, especially in the last 30-40 minutes where it really leaned heavy into the emotional element. But I kept going back to that tote, that treasure chest of, I wanted a little bit more naughtiness to this. I wanted a little bit more nitty gritty to the production hell that it kind of teases at, or the behind the scenes footage. I wanted more of the 3 or 4 lost songs. I wanted those full songs in this documentary that it just really teases at. So I think it dangles a lot of fruit in front of us, but at the end of the day, this was an emotional documentary, and our 2 new documentarian directors, they do a decent job on just really tapping into that emotional element. So this is a true movie for fans, and it doesn't try to be anything other than that. So I do appreciate it on that value.
I definitely wanted more recording booth stuff. Like you said, that treasure trove of high 8s and VHS tapes that they were using to record. You mean to tell me in all of that, they didn't think to bust out the camera for like the one day in the vocal booth that Pauly Shore was there? You don't have any footage of Pauly Shore in the booth?
That's
I call bullshit on that
stuff.
One. It could be.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people. I mean, the fact that Kelly Martin is not a part of this either. And here's the thing. I liked it, but I also saw it for what it was, because I've been in production. Trust me, Justin, that tote was probably 99% garbage. Like, I've had to swim through endless seas of tapes for like corporate shit and end up using 3 minutes of like 80 hours worth of footage. That's just kind of how that stuff works. I mean, think about like days where like you got your first camcorder and you just ran around recording bullshit, right? And then you might have like a little bit of cool stuff on it, but most of it's like you being a dickhead. I have a feeling a lot of that stuff was probably that, especially the fact that they were doing this for like, what, 2 years, going back and forth from like France to California to wherever else they were at. I feel there was probably a lot of nonsense in there. But the feeling I get from this is that this was a crew of people who's like, hey, so-and-so's uncle just happens to be the director of this movie, and we're coming up on 30 years. I bet we could do something with it. And then you get your foot in the door. Disney's always hungry for content that they probably don't have to put money into. They'd be like, yeah, kids, go make your documentary about a Goofy movie and we'll throw it on Disney Plus when the 30-year anniversary hits. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It was decently made. I wouldn't say it was well made, but it served the exact purpose that it was meant to, and that was to ignite an emotional response for people that loved this movie and wanted to see more behind it. Because, Josh, you and I discussed this in our episode. There's like so much hyperbole behind this movie from like IMDb and Wikipedia that is just kind of taken at its face value that, oh, whoever the contributor to this was knew what they were talking about. And watching this documentary, we kind of learned that some of it was true and some of it was, just nonsense. So I liked that part of it, that it was able to like make a clearer picture of the history of the production.
I am going to agree to disagree on that one because I 100% agree that it is, you look at it at face value and you look at it on what it's trying to do. But when you're trying to make a documentary and trying to present to the audience, this is what we're going to show you. As we saw that tote earlier, if you're not going to show half of it, 60%, 70%, whatever it may be, don't show the damn tote. Show it and go to the actual point of what you're going to present as a thesis, what you're going to present to the audience, that this is going to be an emotional roller coaster, that this is going to be something that's going to entice the ones that were fans of the movie and even maybe entice those that have never seen it. But when you're bringing out a tote of footage, then if you're only going to show maybe less than 5% of it, get rid of it. It's not necessary. Stick to what it is intended to do, which is bring out the nostalgic factor. And it does do that to an extent, but we don't really see that until we get an emotional reaction to the 30, 45 minutes left of the documentary. So it has some good footage, but the footage that we are presented with that is supposedly in this tote isn't really that of value. We see some okay moments, but the one thing that really annoyed me with this is when we go back and have the communication between the USA direction to the France unit or to the other studios. To me, that isn't really interesting. It doesn't really, it almost feels like filler to me, where it doesn't really support the emotional response it's trying to do.
I also think that there's probably so much footage that this is more of an editing job than it was a filmmaking job, right? I mean, if you look at original photography, it's a few interviews, the little spiel at the beginning, but like 90% of it is stock footage. So they did use a lot of that tote, if even that footage came from that tote. Like, who's to say that like some of this didn't come from a Disney archive and the tote was let's just say the tote was the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Like, we want to know what's inside it, and that's their lure to get us into it. But they didn't really need it. I agree with you. But at the same time, I do think it is cool that the fact that like everything that's Goofy movie related is in that dude's basement, you know, so that's kind of like a mystere to it as well. Also, I don't know, man, like if I was a Disney heist planner, I'd be like finding out that dude's address right now and busting into his basement and stealing all of that shit too. Like, there's a little bit of brazenness putting your house in a film and showing how much not just Goofy movie, but Disney memorabilia, one of a kind shit is in your basement. I thought that was a daring choice.
Googling it now.
I thought it was cute. I thought it was kind of charming. I didn't realize that James Marsden was Max Goof's voice. I mean, before his big hit in X-Men, he was there in the booth kissing Kelly Martin. That was adorable. I like that little behind the scenes thing. You know, that the whole, like, they're all the bashful, nervous giggles because they did like a take wrong. And by the way, speaking of brazen, calling out Disney line
confusing Jason Marsden with James Marsden.
Yeah,
for
I
legal
was like,
purposes,
wait.
we have to explain that that's a joke.
It's not funny, Josh, if you explain it.
But there's going to be people who are going to be listening to this and being like, James Marsden, really? No wonder that guy came back to do Enchanted, because he worked with him in a Goofy movie.
But to be brazen and be like, it wasn't made for 18 million. It was made for 28. They were fucking lying. This is a huge bomb, even bigger than they said. I appreciate that. I was like, yeah, that's right. Give us the real stuff. Give us what's going on. Piss off the mouse a little bit. Get the IRS involved. But no, I thought it was cute. I was surprised because right before I clicked play, I was like, okay, how long is this? Hour 26. Okay. Is this longer than a Goofy movie? And it is by 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh dang it. But it kicked up those nostalgic feelings. Like, and I appreciate it. There's a few content creators, Josh, I've sent them to you. One guy on Instagram, Dimeach, who loves Powerline and shows up at cons as Powerline and stuff like that. He's a big DJ and does great mixes. And it's nice to know that there is love for this movie floating around, and that there's enough love and nostalgia that if somebody shows up as Powerline, the majority of people aren't going to be like, Devo? No? Devo? No? Okay. No. You know, it's good. It was fine. It's fine.
That brings up a really big point for me because for the most part, I did enjoy this. I will say most of the last like 20 minutes really kind of irked me because as a way to showcase that a Goofy movie exists in the zeitgeist and that there's an emotional and generational following for the movie, we have some 10 to 20 YouTube channels that they highlight and feature. And if you're going to tell me about the D23 panel where they had to turn away 1,000 people, and then you're going to go to these big nostalgia bait YouTube channels that are maybe authentically talking about a Goofy movie, but they're talking about it in a way that, at least in the where it's presented in the documentary, they sound more like they're just reading a script and baiting. I don't want that. Like, that feels more like, hey, look at these people who are trying to monetize their supposed love of a Goofy movie. Show me people at conventions. Show me people at D23. Show me people at Comic-Con who are cosplaying. Show me the guy that's going to conventions dressed as Powerline, doing the dance with people. Show me people doing the perfect cast. Don't have just like this sizzle reel of people being like, today we're talking about an unrelenting classic, a Goofy movie. Today we're talking about an unrelenting classic, a Goofy movie. Like, don't show me that shit. Don't show me the nostalgia critic. He's not in this, but like, I was shocked that he wasn't. But like, don't show me other content creators that are doing this. Like, when they start talking about how it resonated with the Black community, I can kind of understand that, because you're not going to just go out on the street to the middle of Oakland or Chicago and be like, hey, what do you think of a Goofy movie? You want people to just kind of present that naturally. And I get that. But when you're talking about how it's resonating with people, you're not going to sit there and just watch YouTube and be like, yes, because a handful of high profile YouTube creators decided to take time to talk about a Goofy movie. It has cult worthy status, to borrow a parlance from Antonio.
I think you kind of nailed it, where this segment does go on a little too long, because it literally is the last 30 to 40 minutes of the film. And I think what I really did appreciate, and it was kind of the turning point where I was getting a little, okay, we've heard the same thing. It's getting a little repetitive. It's an emotional, and I'm an emotional guy when I feel the nostalgic waterfall pull upon me and I hear a sad story of the relatability. So I'm a sucker for that. So, but I do think it goes a little long, but I think what I really did enjoy is we have that scene. And I think if they would have stuck to it, it would have resonated and had a bigger impact, where we have that narration of the guy that said that he was supposed to read a script, but it didn't sound right. So he read it in a letter. And it was a pivotal moment where he's talking about the father and son dynamic. And it steers away from talking about the movie, but his experience with the movie, where his father is feeling divorcing his mom, and then they talk about the importance of fatherhood, why the father isn't around, and then they bring the Goofy movie in. To me, I thought that was a beautiful moment because they had the animation sketches to support it. They had what the original movie wasn't intended to do, which is grow with us. We have this entertainment family movie that critics just totally missed in the beginning, missed the entire point, but this basic family entertainment, but we didn't appreciate until we grew and we understood our emotions. And that's the story that he's telling. And that's what I think it was really missing from this holistically, is just that story, to be a film that hits us when we reach our maturity, to become not just an entertainment moment, but an emotional adult reflection of the past and present to make us better. And I think that's why this has aged so well. And it was at that moment when he's telling his story that resonates with not just the movie, but everybody that grew with it. This story kind of summed up the emotion that I think everybody that loves this movie is feeling, is the growth of us. Because I can show this to my daughter, my son, when he's old enough, and they're not going to have the same emotional response to it. But this is a movie that became more emotional as we grow older and we understood and we can relate to it. So this is what makes us a timeless classic. And in that moment, when he's reading that letter of how he felt, is the realization of the point of the movie. but it's over explained, to your point, Josh, of all these reviews of how great a Goofy movie is and the repetitiveness of it. Leave it simplistic and touch on the emotional response, because I can't tell you anybody's speech in this movie except for that one.
Well, see, I think that you all are expecting way too much of what this is. Like that was my whole point. I mean, first of all, there isn't a single one of us in this room that wouldn't shill for a Goofy movie if Disney came calling. We'd do the exact same thing we're pitching about right now. I'd be like, yes.
Hell, we're doing it for free right now.
Well, and that's my point. That's my point. They probably are doing it for free too. It's just for exposure. I mean, I think at some point or another, all of us have done like a Newsly ad or some stupid ad for our show that we thought was going to help boost our signal, and it didn't. But if like Disney came calling, that's not my point. The fact that there is 20, 30 minutes of that stuff means that is 20, 30 minutes of time they needed to fill. And that goes back to my point that they probably just did not have good enough footage from that tote. I still think that tote's mostly bullshit, that there was enough to make a cohesive documentary out of. Therefore, they did need all of that stuff to give it a decent runtime. I mean, maybe it's just from my production background where I look at that, I'm like, okay, like that's filler. It's like there's been lots of times where I think a lot of us have like filled out a podcast with stuff we didn't need just to get it a little bit longer and not be like a 28-minute show. That's what this kind of felt like, but it still pushed the buttons of nostalgia from the things that we wanted to see. I honestly think that the best parts of this documentary are the things that we've already seen on TikTok and Instagram, like the stuff in the sound booth. We got to talk about the amazing comparison that they shot, the frame of reference for the Powerline concert, where they really had those three dudes do the choreography with background dancers. They hired a music video director to set up the angles, and then they just kind of transposed it into the film. That was my favorite part, because I didn't think that's how they did it. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. That was the part that like I wanted more of, was that stuff. The booth sessions, the singers was cool. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that that's the stuff that we were going to get the most excitement out of behind the scenes footage, because other than that, it's just going to be Bill Farmer and Jason Marsden in a booth just doing their dialogue. Like, that's not exciting to watch for an hour and 20 minutes. So I think when they were looking at how they were going to get this movie to flow, you know, have your beginning, your exciting middle, and then your nostalgic end, I think that they did the best they could with the footage that they had, and then had to supplement with the YouTubers and the man on the street and stuff like that. So I'll agree with Justin. It's not the best documentary, but I don't think it was supposed to be. It was just supposed to be kind of like a Werther's original. It was supposed to just like take us back to our childhood, you know?
A Werther's original. We're not 80. We're not like, do you remember the Goofy movie?
Your grandparents didn't dig into their pockets and pull out like a Werther's original, and it made you think of grandma or grandpa?
I mean, yeah, but I'm not. I'm not thinking of sucking on a Werther's original while watching this. I'm just more like,
I'm gonna go do it right now.
I'm more like some Fruit Loops.
Can you even buy them anymore?
No, they just come when you become a grandmother.
They just manifest. They just appear on your.
Yeah, it's just like the cookie tin that's actually filled with sewing needles. It just happens when you become a grandparent.
It was fun to see Bill Farmer though, because I had no idea what Bill Farmer looked like.
And I mean, that's still a great segue into what I wanted to talk about here, because I think this is where I think that this is still very much clearly Disney being like, okay, there's a generation of people who love a Goofy movie. Let's just put something out to monetize what we don't care. Whatever you want to make it, whatever, and we'll slap a Goofy movie, something on it, and they'll watch it, and we'll get whatever revenue we get from it.
And we'll never have to talk about it again, ever.
Yeah. And besides the YouTuber thing, I think the thing that made me the most upset is that they didn't even bother getting Tom Snow and Jack Feldman to come in to talk about the non-Powerline songs, because they only spent time talking about the Powerline songs. But there are 4 or 5 other songs in this movie that are not sung by Powerline. There's After Today. There's Nobody Else But You, which, like I said in our previous episode, like that is my favorite song from the soundtrack. Right. I2I notwithstanding, like I2I is beyond a classic. You've got On the Open Road. You've got Lester's Possum Park. There are things in here that still deserve to be talked about, like creating these songs. Like, how do you create a song for Goofy to sing to his son? How do you sing it? How do you create that reconciliation song between Goofy and his son? Because the big thing about this movie when they're in production throughout the documentary is, how do you make a Goofy movie, a movie about Goofy? Like, that was Katzenberg's pitch, was where's the heart? Where's the moral of the story? Like, yeah, we've got all these Looney Tunes things happening, but people aren't going to sit through a 90-minute movie where it's just comedy nonstop. You need a heart to it. Where's Goofy's heart? Goofy's heart is with Max. The heart of the movie is culminated in Nobody Else But You. And the movie could not care less about any of the songs that were not sung by Tevin Campbell.
Well, it also didn't even touch on what you and I spent like a good 20 minutes on, and that is all of the sexual awakenings that the movie represents. Like, they don't even touch on Roxanne at all. They don't touch on the social awkwardness. They don't touch on the teenage characteristics of the people in the school or the principal and how he's kind of like, the closest
they get is saying, "Oh, we had a John Hughes inspiration."
Right. They didn't even touch on all of that. And like you and I talked about on our episode, that's probably one of the most interesting, intriguing concepts of this movie, is that it does titillate in a very interesting way, where it's just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm a 14-year-old boy watching this movie and I get exactly what Max is thinking about. And they don't even talk about that. They don't even have like people say, wow, my first crush was Roxanne because she was essentially in a sex dream.
Well, I think that's where this is tricky to balance, because most of the critics that had a problem with this movie is, how do you have a Goofy movie that's not goofy? And this is what I think Disney had to really balance, is how do we entertain the kids? How do we appease fans? And how do we make this emotional? This is a feat that isn't easy. And this is where I applaud this movie, where it does try to do the balancing act to appease everybody at a very short runtime, which it could have gone longer. And I think it still would have done equally as well as it did in theaters. But I think this one, it really did an okay job on leaving some to the imagination and just giving relatable tidbits on the teenage boy, on how we feel of the crush, or the, now for the parents, how we feel when the kid is having his own life. So to me, I didn't really have a problem with that per se, because I think it does what it needs to do to kind of be a movie for the general audiences. And I think at that time, this was ahead of its time, where it really, people were expecting something just funny, goofy, silly. And that's not what they really got. And it took years to digest on what this movie was. It took years for children to grow, teenagers to grow, to truly understand and appreciate this movie. Me and Alex had a slapping fest on Snow White on Discord, on the adaptation piece of where we get the source material. And we even saw that from DuckTales Treasure of the Lost Lamp, where we have the Charles Bank Uncle Scrooge that inspired Indiana Jones, but critics came back and said this was a Indiana Jones copycat. This isn't the Uncle Scrooge I knew. And critics bashed Treasure of the Lost Lamp because of that. So it's as we grow as generations that we tend, and we're in that generation too, where me and Alex got into it, because we have to understand that there's going to be new variations of that. And I think Goofy, this was the transition piece to touch a new generation, a new audience, that if it came out today, I think we would be having a different conversation to an extent. We would appreciate the emotional element, but at the same time, if we grew up with this character now, we would have an issue with it.
Yeah, maybe. I think that this is a very isolated story for people our generation and below. And maybe this needs another 10 years before it actually really becomes relevant, because I think that people my age, and we're all around the same age group, like, we're not quite to the maturity level of Goofy in this movie yet. Like, yeah, some of us have teenage kids, but they're not quite maxing out on us yet. And we know what's coming. We've probably prepared ourselves by watching a Goofy movie. And that's like our frame of reference for when our kids start becoming separated from us and independent, want to do their own shit and not want to be around us anymore. I'm still a couple years away from that, but it's very specific to a generation, because I'd say that Gen Z and Zennials below us, or sorry, no, we're Zennials, Gen Z and the generation below them, the movie doesn't have enough modern influence and technology in it to make it interesting. Like, they'd probably wonder why Max doesn't have an iPhone while he's on this cross-country trip with his dad, right? Like, it's very specific to a very specific time and place. And so it's really only relevant to the people that they're talking about in the film that are showing nostalgia for it.
My sisters had that Mickey Mouse phone, and seeing that in the movie was like the coolest thing ever at the time. So while we have the Back to the Balcony fellas here, which it's a little serendipitous that they ended up using a Siskel and Ebert review of the movie.
Yeah, right.
And Justin brought this up. It seems like there was almost a fundamental misunderstanding of the versatility of characters, because you, Justin, Antonio, and I, we've had conversations separately about how there's like an evolution of how they understand Jim Carrey throughout the year 1993 or 1994 when he bursts on the scene with Ace Ventura, and they're like, who the hell is this guy and why does he think he's funny? And then you have Dumb and Dumber, and then you end out the year with what was the Mask? You have the Mask, and then you end out the year with Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, and that like they grow, like he grows on them throughout the year, and I think maybe he ate up all their goodwill 2 years prior, but it seemed like they were like, you've told me that you're making a movie about the character Goofy. Okay, sell it to me and like show me how crazy and wacky this is going to be for the next 90 minutes. And then they get this emotional father-son story that's akin to a John Hughes story. And they're like, what the fuck is this? What are you trying to show me here?
Right.
It's almost more of a misunderstanding from the critics about the prop of what's being presented, and them shoehorning the character and the actor into what they expect out of it, rather than letting the character evolve or spread its wings. Like Jim Carrey eventually getting into The Truman Show. Like, it's a funny movie, but it's not that slapstick, bombastic Jim Carrey that we know. But because it's a live action actor, maybe they're a little more accepting, or critics are a little more accepting of that turn into a more dramatic role. Whereas a cartoon character, like cartoon characters can't evolve. They can't do new things. We just had the Day the Earth Blew Up with Looney Tunes. And Justin, you were praising that movie as an evolution of the Looney Tunes brand. And like Antonio said just a little bit ago, this is ahead of its time. So what did you guys think of that moment where Siskel and Ebert showed up and they were like, what the hell is this movie?
I don't think it's a misunderstanding. I think it's gatekeeping. Like, no one gatekeeps properties like Disney properties and comic book, Marvel, video games, stuff like that. It's not a misunderstanding. It's like, this isn't my Goofy. Just like generations now, it's like, that's not my Batman and that's not my Minecraft. You're going to deal with that every generation. And that's why like Justin and I do have friendly debates about what their critiques are and where they're coming from, because, you know, Justin, for the most part, takes a stance of they're just there to tell us if it's worth our dollar or not, right? And then I come from the stance of like, dude, get over the fact that this is not your Goofy. Like, the Goofy you grew up with didn't have a son. And in fact, Goofy most of the time didn't even talk. Most of those Goofy shorts were like narrated by that guy of like how to work out and how to go fishing and stuff. And he'd do stupid shit. So yeah, it's the challenge of being a critic in whatever generation is there's always going to be some form of gatekeeping if it's an intellectual property that you've kind of come up with and you don't like seeing it evolve into something else.
Yeah. And in complete fairness, the clip they showed is a little misleading because Siskel and Ebert did give it 2 thumbs up. So they really did push the agenda on this one of what critics thought and the expectation. And I think it was presented not well in this documentary, that they just wanted to push what the overall critics, and Siskel and Ebert were hot at the time, and this didn't have huge critic reception of positivity. So I think that was the best they can do in a documentary to kind of push their point. So both of them, again, had their flaws with the movie. This isn't, like Antonio said, they're Goofy. This wasn't most critics' Goofy. And we had, like I said, the Jetsons movie that every critic destroyed, that it wasn't their Jetsons. DuckTales, like I said before, was the one that had probably the best critical response because it was most like what they experienced to an extent. So this one is one that, again, was ahead of its time and people were expecting it. And even with the marketing expected more of a goofy type style with a goofy son, and this is going to be 2 times the goof. That's not what this movie was. And I think the marketing didn't help this movie, because if we go back and watch the trailer, it was a fun, non-emotional trailer that we would expect to go in on just a silly, fun, a G-rated family entertainment for those that want to be nostalgic with their kids on Goofy. And walking out, I can almost bet if I were to go back in time at my age and growing up with Goofy, open and honest, I'd probably feel the same way. I wouldn't know how to respond to this movie. This is a family movie with a character from a childhood of many that we kind of just have to take in and respect change for those that, and Alex, I said it in Snow White, that we have to respect the character change, that it's not always going to be pleasant. It's not always going to be good. We don't always agree with the original source material, but let's just respect change on it. And that's what critics had a hard time with, is the expectation of what we're getting. And that's where it really did show up in many reviews, where they couldn't look at a movie for what it is. They wanted something different. And me and Antonio have had this conversation numerous times of take off your nostalgic hat, look at the movie for what it is and what the messaging's trying to do and the story is trying to tell. Leave the character at the door and respect what the intent is.
I'm just surprised Roger was kind of a dick, man, because I remember watching his reviews of the Garfield movies with Bill Murray's voice, and he was giving Roper all kinds of shit for being like critical of it. He's like, no. He's like, you have to understand, these are children's movies. So kids, Garfield, there's another Garfield that looks just like him. And he gives a thumbs up. Yeah. But then again, Ebert, he had some weird takes occasionally. But no, I mean, as a kid,
Tale of Two Kitties. Yep, remember that one?
No, I mean, as a kid, I never thought it was a different Goofy than the Goofy that I saw in all the shorts. I always thought it was just, to me, it's a through line. It's like, oh, he's a kid, cool. I still have never successfully heated up SpaghettiOs with a cigarette lighter. I tried too. I'm
more impressed by the balancing of it than the actual cooking of it. Well, I love the fact that they point that out. They're like, yeah, even though this is bullshit, at least we're having some action on the camera that at least shows that they're attempting to cook food and have a moment, even though we know this would never work.
Oh, hold on a second. Kids, a cigarette lighter was in cars up until about 2010. Now, cigarettes used to actually have to light them on fire. Now you just charge your battery.
Old.
So speaking of the Bigfoot scene, one thing that this documentary
love that scene.
did show me that I loved is that Frank Welker was the voice of the Bigfoot.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I knew that from the credits when we did our last episode about that, and I'm a Frank
his name
Welker
never
fan.
caught my eye, and I never thought about like, oh yeah, they probably just manufactured some noises, but no, they did the Fred. There's a new guy that basically does all the Frank Welker stuff now. If you need someone being an animal or loud roaring noises, it's Fred Tatasciore, I think is his name. He's the voice of the Hulk in the Marvel animated series nowadays as well. Like he does all that stuff. But Frank Welker, Starscream, Megatron, even I think he's Fred in the Scooby-Doo's, and then they also brought him back for Scoob to be Scooby-Doo for some unknown reason, and his Scooby-Doo is not great.
Well, I mean, to me, mostly he is the voice of like 90% of the gremlins in the Gremlin films.
Yep.
Yes.
And then anytime there's like a troll or a creature or a monster in a Spielberg movie, he's like the guy that does the hisses and the shrieks and the squeals. Like he's a very prominent creature effect. And it's funny too. What's the other guy? The guy that does Optimus Prime. I'm drawing a blank.
Peter Cullen
also did the Predator. So there's a lot of crossover with the traditional voice actors from like Disney cartoons and Saturday morning cartoons into the world of sci-fi creatures. That's that's a cool little rabbit hole to go down, and you'll see the same names over and over and over again.
Well, for some reason, they're freaking getting Alan Tudyk to do a goddamn chicken. There's chickens outside.
Which
Go outside with a microphone.
Tangent here. If you watch those sound booth recordings and then you see what's going on in the movie, you know they just replaced him with sound effects. They just wanted to get Alan Tudyk on the movie and like have something there. Like, I think there's only one part of the first Moana movie where I'm like, oh, that very well could be Alan Tudyk, and it's just like a moment where he's just like, hey is walking on the deck, and you just hear him go bark bark bark. like that's it. Everything else is very clearly just like a sound effect, or they have like that one really loud scream where he realizes he's stuck in the middle of the ocean. Like that's just a canned scream that's akin to the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah.
Soapbox thing done. My kids have been watching Moana 1 and 2 nonstop because Moana 2 is out on Disney Plus now. So like I hear it all the time. I'm just like, Alan Tudyk, none of those sounds that he's in the sound booth for in that viral video that he's in there, like none of those are there. None of that is there. Stop it. Now I'm really over it. Let's get back to this documentary. So I know I've been kind of poo-pooing on this because there's a lot of stuff that like I wouldn't have put in there if I were the documentarian. There's stuff that I would prefer to see over other YouTube channels that aren't Antonio and my episode about a Goofy movie, even though we don't have video for it. Like there is a genuineness to it, even though it does seem a little nepotistic, I guess, if that's a word, where it's like, hey, my uncle directed this movie. Let's talk about it because that's big right now. The emotion behind it does seem fairly genuine, even though it is just maybe more of an opportunistic moment to seize. But I think there is just some interesting stuff that comes out of it because, again, you have the Katzenberg thing where he's trying to find out if they can make essentially B-roll movies out of their TV animation department while they make the big buck movies with the bigger profile Disney animation studios. And then Katzenberg gets fired. And oh God, who was the guy that came in the 90s?
Eisner,
yes. Eisner just is penny pinching everywhere he can, even though this movie's already like $10 million in the bank. So he's just like, just get it out as whatever way you can. And they even end up missing their original deadline to get the movie out. And Eisner's just like, just get it out eventually, please. Because it was like one of the last Katzenberg things on the books that he just had to get rid of. And I found that interesting. And I would have liked more time on that too, instead of like going to the French studio and just being like, hey, today I'm doing video diary number 5 with this binder. Like that's the sort of stuff where it's like, what is this adding other than showing that there's like a little bit of communication error because he has to record these tapes and then mail them because email doesn't exist yet. And it takes 2 to 3 weeks for these videos to get out to the animation studio in France. So like, they're not even playing up to that either, because you have to explain to a younger audience that has never had to deal with shipping delays because they have 2-day Amazon Prime. International shipping takes time, but we're not going to worry about that because the important thing is other stuff.
You know, I know that Disney doesn't like doing like expose stuff or like showing things behind the closed doors, you know, because they don't want people digging in there. But there is like that part of the documentary where I feel like Katzenberg is kind of like this kind of anti-hero character that's all shown through mostly like stock photos and sketch drawings of him. I feel like there's a lot of great story in that, where it's almost like that could be a series of like how crazy this film producer, and he was like a talent agent and a lawyer, a film lawyer, and just came into the Disney and started doing shit. And that's why they hired him, is because he wasn't like an old guard guy and he was making all these new decisions. But yeah, I've heard stories of him like throwing coffee mugs at people and burning reels of footage so people had to go shoot it over again. Like that would make for such a great like Mad Men type series, or, you know, he's like the John Dutton of the Disney years. Like, I think that'd be a very interesting idea, but no one's going to do it because Disney doesn't like telling their secrets.
The anti-Dom Bluth.
Read Disney War. Came out in 2005. James B. Stewart about Michael Eisner's reign. It's an amazing book. All the gritty, dark details you want about Katzenberg and Eisner and how they transformed Disney. And then you get all the juicy details about Eisner forcing Katzenberg out, which is why he formed DreamWorks.
Well, I'm even surprised that they even mentioned the Eisenberg-Katzenberg piece of it and not leaving it out, because that is something that I was like crossing my fingers, hoping they'd go in depth, even though it's Disney and it's on Disney Plus and it wasn't going to happen. It teases at something that we really want to kind of peek our heads behind the curtain and really go in depth on. And this is almost a documentary that I wish would have just a spinoff, just focusing on that and not a Goofy movie. It presents something bigger than the topic that is at hand. And I really wanted to know, and Katzenberg is an interesting character from the stories that we get from the interviews, from falling asleep at screenings to when he finally comes in and he has no idea what he's doing. This is almost more interesting than a Goofy movie. And I find that kind of disappointing on how it kind of progresses. And once Katzenberg is out, we kind of just pivot to that emotional 30, 45 minute mark of the YouTubers, the podcasters, whatever it may be. And it really goes into that emotional element. But as an adult, I'm like, give me that behind the scenes dirty shit that Disney isn't going to show us. Give us something of that taboo topic that Disney is going to hold from us. So it almost distracts from this documentary to, I don't know, the cynical part of the adulthood that we really want to see.
Man, I just wanted more stuff about the voice work and the kids being cute when they kiss, man. You guys are over here like, give us the dirt. Who bled on the cells for this movie? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. I mean, I guess I'm kind of jaded because like movie documentaries never really give you that kind of stuff. Like I watched the Clue one, like it's on Prime. It was terrible. I mean, but I just like finding out how the cast interacts with each other, or what little things slip up, and where budgets get cut, and then you have to like make do. The perseverance of of stuff, and so yeah, it got me, the whole like, and then it was a complete disaster, and then seeing the old guys all like the kids love the movie. That shit gets me. It's cute, but I mean, I guess we could really. I mean, that would be kind of fun to see, like, and then 16 animators died to give you the Goofy movie.
Their
Way to bring
blood
us
was
down,
used in the ink. No, I think, guys, that this is one of those, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because this documentary would not exist if it wasn't for a streaming platform, right? So we should be kind of like bending the knee to Disney Plus for allowing them to make a little documentary about a movie that we all grew up with and loved, because if it didn't have a platform like that, it never would have existed. And that's kind of the blessing and the curse of streaming, where it's like, you're not going to make something that's good enough to be screened theatrically and try and like nudge its way into the box office of Minecraft and whatever bullshit Disney or Marvel's out. But at least we do have a place for things like this, where it's like a simple little documentary for us to get our nostalgia fix on. And it's on an app that we probably already have. And I can't be mad that at least it exists and we have a way to see it, because 10 years ago, it wouldn't even be a thing.
I 100% agree with that. And not only that, but it actually introduces some new directors to documentary. I mean, Kimmelton and Ninnis, it's their first documentary. One was an animator and one's an editor, which we can completely see in this movie. From shot for shot. So it is a great introduction to not only have filmmakers network with some nostalgic pieces of it, but also learned from. So you're 100% right that we wouldn't see this in a normal setting a decade ago. But now this is where I'm going to contradict myself 1,000 times over. is the only reason I'm a fan of streaming is to give that opportunity to filmmakers like these two to really show a passion for a topic and bring it to the screen and have people enjoy it, because this isn't a bad documentary. I can nitpick and I can kind of tear it apart of things that I wanted.
Yeah,
but
say give me more, I want more, but
Yeah.
they had their goal and they met it.
Absolutely. And to an extent, that is almost a good sign of a good documentarian, is you want to leave it wanting more. And I think they do a decent enough job to really just tap into the nostalgia, to give that emotional element. It affected me in the last 30 minutes, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it. It still did affect me. But I think they do a great job, and it does set a good starting point on their IMDb resume. It's a good starting point on what they're going to do. For a first go around, these two directors, documentarians, do a fine job on presenting what they want the audience to feel and what they want to see. So given the material that they have and the constraints that Disney has, I think that is an extraordinary feat for these two.
I just got two things that I want to say before I'm done with my piece on this. And the first one is, I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of shit because with physical media kind of dwindling down, the special features that used to be the selling point of physical media are dwindling down with, the extinction of the format. You're going to see a lot more of this kind of stuff on these apps, and not just Disney, but I think all of the major streaming apps, because content is the battle, right? It's not about quality these days. It's who could put the most content out. And if you can create something that people are interested in watching behind the scenes stuff that they don't get in physical media anymore, I think that is where you're going to see a lot more things like this, especially as we're coming around the 30, 35, 40-year anniversaries of big movies that have a lot of nostalgia for our generation. So I think this is like a precursor of what's to come in the sense of behind the scenes featurettes and things like that. The other thing is, are we kind of signed up? Because I totally would be, if we did like an old man Goofy in the future, like Loganize him and have like Max be the Goofy, like kind of like what they did with the Vacation movie, where they had Ed Helms play Rusty as like a 40-year-old loser. Like, do you think that there's enough motion to see something like that, even if it goes straight to streaming?
That's
100%.
Alex's favorite trope.
Old man, whatever.
Yep. No, we pick up with your hero who is in a good position at the end of the last movie, and now they're a broke ass loser piece of crap.
Goofy
And
just
this
lost
movie
his
is
Social
about
Security
their
and
despair.
Medicaid, and now he has to move back in with Max. It'll be poignant.
Or Max lost his job and he's on the rocks with Roxanne or whoever that woman was in Twice Upon a Christmas special that wasn't Roxanne.
Oh yeah,
which
with
is
the
a
short
deep
hair.
cut for any Disney person who is not, I'm guessing, any of you guys in this group.
Max still lives at home in the basement. He never left.
Hey, he moved out to the top of the garage. Okay.
I would be fine with Old Man Goof if it's like he gets something in the mail about what actually killed his wife.
Or
he goes on so all those skills he's developed from the Goofy shorts he puts to use, the skiing, the putting together the home theater, all that.
Oh my
crap,
god! Or else they do like
to enact
a Wild
revenge.
Hogs or Old Dogs, but with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. They're all like in their 70s. One last hurrah, right?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, it's just this cut of like Mickey walking to his room, arthritic hands putting
my
on the
God.
gloves for one last
I'm
job.
so sad right now.
Well,
This is why they didn't ask us to be on the YouTube
hey,
special.
Antonio and I had a really nice chat about it. You guys just haven't listened to it, obviously.
Well, we're not talking about Goofy movie. We're talking about the goddamn documentary right now.
Well, let's wrap this up here because I think we've said the things that need us.
No, we got to keep going for another 25 minutes to beat the runtime of a Goofy movie.
Let's do the talking smack thing first, real quick. Would you say this is a must see or pass? I think this is a caveated one where if you love a Goofy movie, it's worth watching. But But if you have no interest in a Goofy movie, then it's a pass. So like, I think it's a little bit of a caveated one. But Alex, how about you?
It's must see. It's cute. It's harmless. And damn you, Antonio. I hope from your lips, not to God's ears, that we get more of this crap. Yeah, it's must see. It's cute. Go, Antonio.
I mean, yeah, it's a must see because it really treated us to a lot of things we'd never seen before. But on that note, you could probably get on Instagram right now and just see screenshots of all the shit that is worth seeing behind the scenes. So if you don't want to sit and watch the whole documentary, you can see the Powerline stuff. I watch it like 5 times a day on people's TikTok. Like it's out there. So like, that's the other thing too, is you don't have to feel boxed in to a movie anymore. If you just want to see the highlights, there's so many places to do that.
For me, I did an experiment because before watching the documentary, I invited my daughter Brooklyn to join me with it. And she said, I like an extreme Goofy movie better. And that
Blasphemy.
sparked me. Yes. So
She's grounded, right?
she was grounded in watching this documentary with me because she had no choice. So after it, she wasn't on her phone. She didn't get up from the chair. And by the end of it, she wanted to watch a Goofy movie. So when you take somebody that's 14 years old watching a documentary about something that she had no interest in and it enticed her to watch it, there's a respect there. And I think given the pacing and, again, the nostalgic target, but there's something here of entertainment value where even watching it, I've watched it twice, and I picked up something new from even the second time. So there is something that's very hard to do when you're watching a documentary. There's probably less than 10% of documentaries that you feel a rewatch value. Here we do get that because there's a relatability and there's quick pacing to it. So to me, I think this does a great job on not only satisfying the nostalgic factor, even though I know I'm going to be that crouchety old man that really wants more when it comes to a Goofy movie, but I think here it really does add value, and it adds value not just for me when I first saw it, but it added value and appreciation and intrigue to those that want to be introduced to a Goofy movie or appreciate it for what it is just being introduced. So it's a must see for me because especially when I talk about 2 new documentarians going after this film, I was actually pretty impressed with the amount of entertainment value this movie had. So I think it's a must see.
To wrap up, let's each share like kind of what a Goofy movie means to us, because we're also here to celebrate 30 years of a Goofy movie. Anyone who wants to hear like more in depth on mine and Antonio's views, again, the episode will be linked in the episode description from our talk from 3 years ago now. But Justin, let's start with you. What does a Goofy movie mean to you, like throughout the last 30 years and as you are now?
When I first watched it, I did see it in theater, and this was one that did resonate with me when it comes to Max. The music, and Josh, we share the same favorite song in this movie, is I found that more appealing and more emotional, because I'm an emotional guy, is it resonated with me with building relationships. And that's either with my parents or any father figure. It doesn't even have to be your parents. It's those that you look up to. And that's where I really did relate to this movie is you look up to somebody. It doesn't have to be a father figure. And at that time, it was kind of a rough time for me where I had to relate to another father figure. So that's where that song really meant a lot to me. But at the same time, you have the romance, you have the high school kind of popularity, you have the social pressures that teenagers felt, and I felt it then too. But as an adult, and I spoke to it earlier, it has become an emotional movie because it is even more relatable because it's almost stacking where it takes us back to our youth, but it also takes us back to the present, where as parents, we kind of want to integrate. We want to intertwine what we felt then and how we parent now. And we want to overcomplicate this movie more than what it is. But it's a movie of relationships. And I think that's what really makes me emotional on it. I can take the Goofy character out. I can take all the characters out and just have the mere situation and the music and the wanting to be popular, the wanting to be relevant, the wanting to be a good parent. All of these emotional factors add to something very special. it is going to be, to me, it's very hard not to find one person that can't take away an emotional element or relatability factor to this movie. And I think the characters of Goofy really do distract to what people saw back then. So to me, this movie is, I can watch it over and over again and still have the emotional reaction to it. And I think it's one of Disney's better films when it comes to experiments. This one is the most successful, in my opinion.
Alex, how about you?
It's not one that I revisit often, but it is one that I have very fond feelings for. It was amusing to see Goofy on the big screen and Max, and of course as a child I just related to Max because, you know, why are our parents bothering us? Why is that? But also as a child I remember feeling despair for Goofy because he just wants time with Max, and seeing Goofy be sad and not his screechy yowly self was painful. And of course, you know, it ended in a happy note. And of course, re-seeing it on Disney Channel as a burgeoning child, I started realizing that Lola Bunny and Roxanne are very, very pretty.
Can't forget Minerva Mink.
But but the further, you know, getting away from it, I start realizing, especially, you know, living away from family, I don't live with any family within very close proximity. I understand what they were writing for and why they were writing, of like needing a connection as you feel your child growing away from you and developing their own lives and no longer needing you to be a guiding hand eternally upon them. So I have a deep appreciation for what it introduced me to as a child and the emotional reckonings that came with that. But then also the hard pivot as an adult, realizing that this movie is a lot more about letting go and reconnection than just being a cute little whimsical thing, which is to entertain your kids for 90 minutes.
Antonio, go ahead.
I mean, we have a whole episode dedicated to it, but I think for me, like I said in that one, is there's something about the fact that there were hardly any Disney films, animated or not, that had to deal with fathers and sons. Especially like, you know, Disney loves widowed fathers, but it's always daughters. And here we have a widowed father and a son and their relationship. So at the end of the day, this really is like the Disney movie for boys and young men growing up, especially relationships with their father or not. Like anyone can relate to that. And it really kind of talks about like what it is to be a boy growing into like manhood, and especially touching on that like sex dream at the very beginning and the awkwardness and feeling that. I think one thing that the film does really great is showing that how quickly girls mature more than boys, because like Roxanne and her friends all have their shit together and Max and PJ are bumbling idiots. Like that's real. So I love that there is a Disney animated film that can help guide young boys and men through that phase of their life, and there really aren't any others besides that. That's what I really take away from the movie.
Antonio, I have to thank you again, because bringing up PJ, you reminded me of my favorite part of this documentary, and that is seeing Rob Paulson's glorious mullet when they had him on to talk about PJ. Oh, I had to pause it and just marvel at that thing. I was like, oh my God, Rob Paulson, what did you have in your head?
The fact that his normal speaking voice is closer to Pinky than anything else is crazy.
Oh yeah, it's pretty close to like his Carl Weezer too. It's just like he was Raphael at the time, like part of the Ninja Turtles animated series from the 90s. So like the fact that he was rocking that mullet and just going like, you tin face geek, like just perfect 90s right there.
Right.
For me, a Goofy movie, as I mentioned before in the episode with Antonio on the Cultworthy, it's a movie that really opened my eyes to just making an effort with my parents, particularly my dad. I shared the story about how when I was in like 5th grade, I waved to my dad who was sitting in the stands while I was getting ready to play a basketball game. And a teammate asked me like, oh, is that your grandpa? And I was like, no, that's my dad. And that was the moment I realized my dad was older than most other dads. And a Goofy movie just really resonated with me, especially that moment before Nobody Else But You, where Goofy just says, I know you're growing up. I don't need to be the center of your life. I just want to be a part of it. And that line had stuck with me for the rest of my dad's life and like through my mom's older years as well. Anytime I was just like, oh God, Dad, you're so needy, I almost immediately like snapped myself out of it and was just like, he just needs a moment with me. Because at his slightly advanced age, who knows when the last one's going to be. And again, thankfully, he lasted in my life until I was close to 40, and he lasted into his mid 80s. So like he got a good chunk of time. He and I got a good chunk of time. But it was a movie that really just put a lot of perspective on time for me. And even with all the relatable stuff with Max, and now as I'm older, the relatable stuff with Goofy, all that stuff is great. And the music is fantastic. Underrated soundtrack, as I mentioned again. I'm going to call back to the Cultworthy episode. This is like an all-time soundtrack for me. Like you have The Bodyguard and you have a Goofy movie, like right there with each other. A Goofy movie is it's an accidental success that didn't know how successful it was when it came out because people just did not understand it, and they didn't know what they wanted out of a movie featuring Goofy as the lead. And I think that's part of what led to this misconception with parents and critics about what this movie is. And I'm just thankful that there are so many people in our generation and in the world that are just like, yeah, eye to eye, Goofy movie. Like this movie speaks to me in ways that I have not ever seen a movie do to me before. Like I remember I think I was playing Destiny back in like 2014. I was just sitting on my couch talking with my friends through my headset, and I really needed music to like keep me awake. So I'm just like, I need a Goofy movie soundtrack. So I hit that, and the first track on that soundtrack is Eye to Eye. And like 3 of my teammates in that squad that we were in were just like, dude, is that Powerline? I'm like, fuck yeah, it is. And they're like, hell yeah, crank that shit up. And so like I like threw my phone on my shoulder with the volume maxed out, and we just listened to Powerline for like the next 5 minutes or however long that song goes. And like we're a diverse group of people playing video games. Like you wouldn't expect 3 of the 4 people in the party to be like, hell yeah, let's listen to some Disney classics. So with that amusing anecdote and everyone else just sharing this about a Goofy movie, let us know what you think of a Goofy movie. You can hit us up on the social medias at Talking Smack Pod on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, Hive Social, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, whatever it may be. If you're listening, watching on YouTube, hit like, let us know in the comments what a Goofy movie means to you. Did you like this documentary? Did you not? What did you think of it? What did you take away from it? All that sort of jazz. But most importantly, Justin, Antonio, thank you for being here as well to talk about this. Please let everyone know about Back to the Balcony as well as your respective individual podcasts.
Okay, well, Back to the Balcony, you can listen to or see on YouTube every Tuesday. Justin and I, we cover films that were reviewed by Siskel and Ebert, and we critique their critiques. And then for me, you can find me at thecultworthy.com for the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast and all related podcast and guest spots.
And you can find me at themoviewire.com and anywhere you listen to your respected podcast.
Alex, let everyone know where they can join in on the conversation in the Smackiverse, as we recently dubbed it, in an episode that will be coming out after this one.
You can join our Discord. It is at the link down below. It is tsmackpod@gmail.com, in which we have a plethora of options of which to join us. And if you're on the right day, you can see that I post in the wrong room quite frequently, apparently, according to Matt, who made numerous overlapping categories.
Well, thank you again to everyone for being here. Alex, I know it's late for us. Justin, Antonio, thank you for being here with your living in the pastness, so it's not as inconvenient for you. Please like, subscribe, rate, review on your podcatcher of choice. Thank you so much again for listening, everyone. Take care. And Justin, Antonio, what should people be watching?
Star Trek.
I'll sync it up in post. You guys are welcome.
Beat it, doofus.